So we'll get started. My name is Graham Glass. I'm the CEO and founder of CYPHER Learning. And I have one slide here that I will share with you, which is the basic outline of this presentation, which is right here. So I only have 30 minutes. So I thought I'd give you a little bit of a background, which I think is quite pertinent to this particular presentation. Then I'm going to talk about some of the similar challenges with regards to assessment that we have had to deal with in the past. So AI is not the first time we've had to deal with this. And then I'm going to suggest a nice way forward to deal with this situation and give you a few examples. So that's the overall flow of my presentation. So I'm going to start with talking about my own background. So I grew up in the UK. I went to a top 10 UK school called Haberdashers. That definitely was formative for me. And then I came to Dallas, Texas to do my graduate work. And when I was there doing my PhD in computer science, the faculty reached out to me and said, "Hey, Graham, would you like to start teaching computer science here at UT Dallas?" And I had a big zero of teaching experience, but I always thought it would be good fun. And so, of course, I said yes. And I had a fantastic time teaching there. And UT Dallas, University of Texas at Dallas, was very a job-oriented school. And so I decided I'm going to teach everything that I teach using projects. So everyone who was taking my courses in programming languages, in operating systems, in theory, every single person had to actually build something in my course. And time again, I had people saying that was the best course I ever took because it was the first course where I felt like I actually learned how to build something. So I was really happy about that. And I did a whole bunch of work at UTD, and then I formed a training company. So I started training people all over the world in computer science techniques. I hired and trained a lot of instructors, and that was where I got my corporate training experience. And then ultimately I founded CYPHER Learning, which is building a modern learning platform. And the number one thing that I do all day long is AI. So in our platform, AI is a really cool part, a very critical part. So I am using AI at least 3 to 4 hours a day. So I'm really immersed in this subject. And so when the opportunity to share some of my ideas about how to deal with the use of AI in higher ed, I jumped at the chance. Now, honestly, in some respects, I feel that this presentation, although it was titled Changing the Evaluation Game, really should be called Changing the Teaching Game. Because I think the surge of AI is actually indicating that it would be nice if we changed the way we thought about how we actually taught in higher ed. And I'll tell you the reason for this. And I'm going to go back to my days in UT Dallas to kind of share with you what challenges we faced there and how we dealt with them. So this is probably 15, 20 years ago. And I was a faculty member there, and I was teaching computer science. And as I mentioned, my natural way to teach was to build projects because I'm a very hands-on engineer kind of guy. So people would come into my course expecting a lot of theory, expecting to write essays and me standing up and reading the book, which is what a lot of my professors were doing at the time. But instead I said, for example, I'm going to be teaching you the programming language called C. But what you're actually going to do is you are going to build a neural network simulator with animated graphics. And I got into how neural networks work, which is ahead of its time because now they're taking over the world, it seems like. But back in those days, it was just an intellectual curiosity. So everyone in the course shifted from, I'm going to be learning the programming language. They shifted to, I need to learn this programming language in order to build this particular project. It was like a mind shift in my students. And people really enjoyed that. And so, of course, they learned the subject, they learned the programming language, but they were really focused on how do they actually build that stuff. So that was the first thing. It was a very project-based kind of style. The second thing is that as people built their project, they were beginning to understand the material much deeper than they ever would simply by reading a book or writing an essay or writing, mini snippets of code, which was the norm at that time. The second thing that I did is I thought, I want to make sure that these students really understand what they're building, and they're not, copying code from other people. Because, by the way, I will confess live, I actually did help somebody cheat back in the UK, and the professor found out and said, Graham, if you're going to help this other person with your code, you're going to share the grade. And that was the first and last time that I ever helped anybody to cheat. But anyway, going back to the UT Dallas story. So I decided, after you've built the project, you are going to get up in class and describe to the rest of the students how you built your project and how it works, and give them a guided tour. And that basically almost guaranteed that no one was going to simply cheat it. Because if you just copied the code from someone, it might look good, but just imagine the fear of getting up in front of 50 other students and describing something that you didn't actually build yourself. And in those environments, the students would be able to ask questions. So it's not a one-way communication of knowledge, it's a two-way one. So by introducing that whole concept of presenting to other people and somewhat of a peer review and a QA, that also ensured that people did not really cheat and short circuit the process. The last thing I did, and this is more of a psychological thing, I guess, versus just a straightforward thing, is that we did have a final exam, and it was me in the room, walking around the room, seeing if anybody cheated. And at the very beginning, I would say, listen, everybody, some of you are going to be tempted to cheat. And if you cheat, you are actually cheating yourself, because when you go into the real world, if you have got your credentials, but you didn't really earn them, you're going to fail. And if you fail, it's going to be much worse failing in 3 years' time in front of a bunch of people than working harder now and actually getting a real credential. And I do think that actually worked in a way. We had very few people attempting to cheat in my course. So I remember at the end of me teaching that way, project-based, peer reviews, presentations, Q&A, I remember thinking, this is a really effective way to teach. So what I decided to do, I went through the entire computer science curriculum. There was like 20 or 30 courses that were being taught by various professors at UT Dallas. And I remember thinking, I bet you every single one of these courses can be taught in the way that I taught mine. In other words, you build a project, you present it, there's Q&A, maybe a final proctored exam. And this is kind of funny. So I did it out of just on my own steam, if you like. I came up with the whole thing. I was really proud of it, very excited. And I sent off an email one night to the dean of UT Dallas at that point. And I said, hey, I've got great news. This is the really nice way to teach. Here's how you could do it for the rest of the curriculum. And then about an hour later, I get this email that said, listen, Graham, if we wanted to teach people how to actually write code and build stuff, these students should just go to a community college. So basically, his message at that point was, please don't be practical. Please don't think in terms of that. That's like everyday stuff. We're at a higher echelon. It's all theory and math here. Now, by the way, I gave a commencement speech at UT Dallas a couple of years ago. It's not that way at all right now. It's much more project oriented. So I'm really talking about the way that things used to be back then. So how is that story relevant to this new age of AI? So, the biggest issue that people normally raise is around essays. Like, well, if I'm using essays as my primary way to evaluate someone's knowledge, then it's too easy to cheat using AI. And it is actually, even if the AI doesn't write the whole thing, it could write 90% of it, and then you just tweak it. So the knowledge isn't really coming from you. And so the question is, how do you deal with that? And it's very predictable. The way where there's always like, well, I'm going to buy some special AI detector tool, which is a completely losing proposition, by the way, because number one, AIs are getting better. They're becoming more human-like. And already AI detectors are being fooled everywhere. And it's just a completely pointless arms race as far as I can see. I really think the way to deal with it is to change the way that you assess people. And in doing so, ideally change the way that you teach people. So just harken back to the way I was teaching at UT Dallas. It was project-based, peer reviews, oral examination. And a combination of those three not only gives the students much better preparation for the real world, but they're actually learning how to actually build things, which all the studies show you retain knowledge much, much better when you put it into action. And writing something down on an essay is not putting anything into action. You don't really remember it very well. So let's talk a little bit more about practical stuff. So let's just talk about AI in general. Should students be using AI as part of their university experience? Now, there may be some variations in how people think about what is the point of higher ed in the first place, because part of it is socialization. It's where maybe you have your first serious love. You get into debates with fellow students. There is a ton of really great stuff that I loved myself when I went to University of Southampton. But I do really think that a lot of people view it as also a way to prepare people for the, in quote, real world. And these days it becomes even more important with people coming out of university with debt. Then having your ability to get a good job in the real world is very practically important. So let's talk about the real world then. What does it do? What do you have to do to prepare somebody for the real world? So, in my own company, everybody uses AI. The engineers, the marketing team, the salespeople, our company president, everyone, the legal department, everybody uses AI. And the reason being is not because we all love cheating. It's not because we're all lazy. It's because we know that it makes you more productive. And so, for example, I'm a hands-on CTO. And so I write computer code every day. And having an AI sidekick helps me fix bugs, write better code, do code reviews, do brainstorming, all of that stuff. And if you took the AI away from me, I could still do what I do. It's just going to take me twice as long. And why would I do that? So the real world is already massively adopting AI, and that is going to continue. Because the other thing to remember is that AIs continue to get better and better and better. And people are talking about putting AIs on your desk, carrying them around in your pocket, putting them in your glasses. It's everywhere. And I think the equation in the real world is human is not as good as human plus AI. So human plus AI is basically, practically speaking, the real world. So my feeling is not only should higher ed adopt AI, but I think in a vast majority of cases, courses should require AI. It's like, practically speaking, if you're going to get good at this subject, you should really be using AI from the get-go. I've got two young boys, 4 and 8, and they're already using AI. And it's never in the context of cheating on your homework. It's all about building things. Like one of my boys is obsessed by the Golden Gate Bridge. And so he and I will use AI to create really cool imagery of the Golden Gate Bridge in space and the Golden Gate Bridge 100 years ago, 3,000 years in the future, and put together a little book on the Golden Gate Bridge that's illustrated. And when I was a kid and 4 years old, I couldn't do any of that stuff. Or my 8-year-old is writing essays already. And one of the reasons he loves to write essays is because the AI will create imagery for him. So it's actually more like a book than an essay. And so they're using it at school. I think it should be a requirement in higher ed. So how will that actually work out then? So let's go back to my days at UT Dallas, but now fast forward, like what would it have been like if AI had existed when I was teaching? So honestly, not a lot would change, which is a good sign. What I would do, I would say, hey, everybody, you're learning, let's just use a more modern language, Python. So I'm going to teach you the Python programming language, and your project is going to be built to build quite a sophisticated application. It will be hosted in the cloud. It's going to have a nice user interface. It's going to incorporate some AI functionality. And the students might be going, holy cow, how can I build this on my own? And I'm like, you're not going to build this on your own, because you're also going to be using an AI to supercharge you, which is the whole point of AI as far as I'm concerned. So I would raise the bar. They would be building more complicated projects now because they're going to be using AI. And if they get stuck with AI, I'm going to help them make sure they all have access. Maybe the university's done a deal with OpenAI and there's an OpenAI EDU version, I know. So that would be part one. It would still be project-based, but the projects would be more difficult because they should be, because now all my students are using an AI. The second thing is, what about the assessment? Very similar. I would get them to stand up on stage, or if they're shy, maybe do it, through Zoom or through a keyboard. But they would have to present how I built this project. But part of that presentation would be, and here's where I used AI, and here are the limitations. Here's how I dealt with those limitations. Here's how I got external input. And this is, once again, a real world thing. Everybody in the real world has to learn what AI is good at, what it's not good at, and dealing with that. So this is a very practical, useful thing. Then there would be a Q&A session with the students, but also potentially with AIs. So in other words, if you're going to practice your presentation, then you could practice your presentation with the help of an AI. So give the presentation, let the AI ask you questions, get better at it, and then present in front of real humans. And that is just like the real world. A lot of people now use AI to rehearse things and practice things so they get better at them. I think the one thing that I would do differently now is I would, towards the end of the semester, I would have an oral exam one-on-one with the students. Because there's one thing talking to a whole bunch of students in the audience, but talking to the instructor, and I can drill deep down into their project, gives me another handle on how well does this person really know what they claim to have done. So more humans in the loop, raising the bar in terms of what I expect, and allowing them to use AIs to practice those skills as well. And I think that combination not only prepares students much better for the real world, but notice I didn't use assessments at all. And if you do use, essays, if you do use essays, I would not use them for any meaningful part of the grade. They might be formative. They might be for, making sure, writing down your thoughts, but I would not use essays at all for any kind of formal assessment for all the obvious reasons. It's just too easy to cheat. And it really doesn't help the students that much, because almost no one writes essays in the real world. It's not really a great preparation for them. Now, I wanted to finish up before I go to the QA part by sharing some examples, the kind of projects that you might give in various different scenarios. Because obviously I taught computer science, but people are teaching English, people are teaching history, people are teaching marketing, for example. So how would this apply? Well, in the world of computer science, I'd probably give an application now that was meaningful, but the application itself would have some AI-powered functionality. Like in the CYPHER learning platform, we're building out CYPHER Agent, which can help anyone in a higher ed environment to learn anything and practice anything and coach you on stuff. And so an example, build something which helps you to, upgrade your home, take pictures of rooms in your home and automatically show images of how it could look using AI. You can build that in a semester easily in computer science. So that's the kind of really useful stuff that you could build in a computer science course. And by the way, one of the things that we've noticed in our own company is that when we are interviewing people for positions now, we are much more interested in what have you actually built and how did you build it? Much more so than where you graduated from and what your degree is from. And I talk with a lot of my fellow colleagues, and people put less and less weight on where you got your degree, etc., and much more weight on what is your actual project experience. And I think that's probably a trend. So now let's just say that you are learning English. And so the kind of things that you can do are things like collaborative stories. Like, I would like you to write not just an essay. I want you to write a book. And it's going to be a science fiction story or a historical story or something like that. And I want it to be professionally illustrated. I want it to have a table of contents. I want at the end of the book to be peer reviews from, 5 randomly chosen students. So other students will read the book that you wrote and write down what they thought about it. And I'm going to teach the students how to collaborate with an AI during the storytelling process, and how you came up with the script and how the AI improved it, and then you improved on the AI. And by the way, AIs are not that great at coming up with great stories. Like, one of my friends in the UK is involved in the movie production business, and he's really good at stories. And I came up with my own story. He reviewed it. He gave me some suggestions. I tried to use an AI to improve part of it. And sure enough, he goes, yeah, but that part's a bit stilted. And then I applied my human mind and massively upgraded the story. But showing the instructor, here's how I gradually built my story, and here's the history of all the edits, and here's how I used AI to proofread it, et cetera, once again, is a really valuable experience. So you're not writing an essay, you are writing an entire peer-reviewed book. What about marketing? So if you're teaching marketing, you could come up with, here's how I would build a marketing campaign to sell X. And I would use AI to brainstorm it. Then I would make my own various improvements. Then I would try my marketing campaign on a bunch of humans and get their feedback. I might try my marketing campaign against a variety of different AIs and see how well that works. And that, by the way, is once again real world. Like, marketing departments these days realize it's not just about convincing humans, it's about convincing the AIs that run Amazon and Google, etc., that whatever you have is actually valuable. And, in some respects, yeah, that's a little bit sad. But once again, it's the real world. And I think it's good to live in the real world and prepare people for the real world. So, just to recap, my background is in teaching, higher ed, corporate training, modern learning platform, using AI all the time. So that's kind of the background, the perspective that I come from. When I was at UT Dallas 20 odd years ago, most courses were not practical. Most courses were extremely theoretical. So when you left university, that was when you started to think, how do I actually build things? How do I get my first job? And people do not have that luxury anymore, sad to say. A lot of entry-level jobs are being replaced at this point. So if you actually want to go to a university, you need to come out with practical, job-oriented experience. Otherwise, you're going to have a whole bunch of debt and no way to pay the debt off, which is miserable. So back in the UTD days, it was project-oriented, peer review, building stuff. I did suggest it to the university. They poo-pooed it. Now they're actually with the program. These days, you can do the very similar thing, introduce more AI into the mix. I personally would recommend using oral examinations as well as a way to double guarantee that this student has the real world experience. So that basically is the end of my presentation. I hope that was useful for you. And at this point, I would be more than happy to take any questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Graham. Let's see if there are questions around the room. I have a couple, but I'll just wait for others to ask
Sure.
any questions. All right, great. So, Graham, a couple of questions. The first one is we generally speak about, I think we have been talking about this, that when we go to university, we should come out job ready. But is that really the case? Because yesterday we had a presenter who actually challenged the thought process that shouldn't be looking at making better citizens and not just people with tech skills. So would like to elaborate on that.
So I totally agree with that as well. I don't think it's either or. And I think that, it's kind of hard to teach someone to be a good citizen. Like, you are going to be a good citizen. And quite honestly, I think that kind of learning should be done way before higher ed.
Correct.
I mean, I'm trying to teach my boys to be good citizens at age 4 and 8.
True. No,
if by the time you come to higher ed, you don't know civics, you don't know how to be a good citizen, I don't know whether another few years at higher ed is going to change that.
Absolutely. I like the comment.
How I feel about that.
Many times people will point out that, the students went to engineering schools, they didn't turn out to be the way, like job ready, as well as good citizens. You're right. They had like good 10, 12 years of education prior to that. That should have certainly made that. And not just education, I mean their homes education as well, not just the formal education process. Great. And the second point, I know that, when you speak about using AI to create assessments, to help them, come up with new projects, work on those projects, great. Certainly, we have seen some use cases in computer science, maths, STEM subjects primarily. Do you have any thoughts on how can we leverage Gen AI tools to create more projects? I think business education also has a lot of projects, but for humanities majors, we have
absolutely. So I will make a confession, but it's not really a confession. I'm actually happy. So I used AI as part of preparing for this presentation.
Lovely.
I actually came up with all the main ideas. Then I brainstormed it. I refined a few ideas. And at the very end, I had this thing which says examples. Provide 3 examples of different projects in different areas. So I brainstormed with the AI, and literally in 3 minutes, I had 3 really good projects in completely different domains. So the AI is not just about helping the students, it's also about helping the instructors. And, you just open your mind to it, say, I'm going to go from being academic and essay-oriented to being more job-ready and project-oriented. And AIs can come up with projects really, really quickly. And the instructors can use AI to prepare themselves for their presentations to their students. So maybe I should have mentioned that a bit more, but AI can help both the teachers and the learners.
The fair point. Just one point on that particular topic. We know that while the AI models are improving and they are maturing, they are filling all the gaps, but AI still can give us randomly created content, which may not be true. So how do you tackle that?
Well, so, if you're an instructor, you should be good at the subject that you're teaching. So I'm making the assumption that if you're an instructor, you're going to take the extra step to ensure that whatever you teach, whether it's the project quality or whatever else, is accurate. That goes without saying.
Of course.
With the learners, that's one of the things I would start off every course with, because I use AI and I see it making mistakes. So I would say AI is not some super genius. It makes mistakes, but it's really, really good for helping you. But the AIs will always try and make you happy. That's the way that they're trained.
Designed, right.
So if they say, hey, what a brilliant idea, that doesn't mean it's brilliant. It just means that they're trying to keep you happy.
Absolutely.
So I'm very, very practical about this stuff. But that's one of the reasons why you do peer reviews. That's one of the reasons that you build stuff. Like if the AI gives you wrong code and you try and build something, it's going to fail with bugs. That's where reality kicks in. True. So I tend to be very practical about the way I talk about using AI.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much for your time and presentation, Graham. We will now conclude this presentation and move on to the final presentation of this session, 3M.
Right. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye. See you.